emaciated, malnourished. And I remember looking at that saying, Mum, why is it that I'm so comfortable and these children have to suffer? I'd say that there's been a lot of give and take over the last few thousand years, and a lot of the give and take has become quite negative. People have become very self-centered.
Is there hope, Sona, for people who want to know, like, is it going to get better?
Yeah, there's only hope. I think along with hope, there's a deep faith that at the core, humanity is good. And so if each one of us goes back to our goodness, we can create a better world.
What are the values that meditation brings to life?
I think for me, the first thing that I would say foundation to my entire life is the word non-violence. And I knew this word from Mahatma Gandhi's teachings, saying that everything that's coming out of me, whether it's a thought, a feeling, a word, behavior, is because of me. It's not because of anyone else. A simple thing like you're traveling from A to B, flights get delayed, you miss a connection. How do you handle your feelings at the time? So it's not about just people and relationships. It's everything. We probably all have a particular weakness that gets triggered in many different ways. And I think I've identified my own weakness being a feeling of rejection. So if I feel rejected in any way, and it's all happening in my head, it's not that someone's rejecting me, but if I feel that in any way, there can be a reaction. I mean, I can many times bypass the feeling and go, nah, I'm not giving into this. But if there is a reaction, usually when I try to do all the analysis, the internal analysis, it takes me back there. If I feel in any way that I'm going back to that place, I just ask myself, why? You're doing so well in life. People love you. You love yourself. God loves you. There's no need to feel rejected. No, the child is like a sponge. And so whatever happens around you, you just kind of absorb it, including your own emotions. And then that sort of gets cemented as part of your, as part of the foundation of your life, like your programming. Again, meditation is a right brain process. It's not a logical process. It's a way of going deeper inside yourself and reconnecting, not just with all these layers of acquired behaviors and emotions, but even deeper, going to the very core of the soul and really feeling and experiencing your goodness. Once I get confident that there is something good inside me, then from that perspective, I can look at all the layers, and perhaps I could call it rubbish, the stuff that's accumulated, and I can see it in a detached way. I don't get emotional about the fact that I'm a bit angry and I'm a bit greedy or I'm a bit attached. Some people don't even have much of a personal life 5 days a week. They're working 12 hours, 14 hours a day. So somehow we've lost the ability to balance our lives. Meditation helps me to reconnect with the goodness within, which makes me feel worthy to myself. The thing with gold is you can mold it, right? You shape it. It's soft, it's very pliable. I always remember that. I remember that you can mold gold, and the more flexible and easy I am, the more accepting I am, the more I'm coming closer to my truth.
Hello, everyone. So today we have another exciting guest on Dose of Inspirational Light. Sona Bahri has been practicing and teaching meditation for the past 28 years. Since March 2008, Sona has been teaching meditation in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, both in the corporate environment and to individuals personally. She currently holds the position of Director, Inner Space Center in Abu Dhabi, and is responsible for the day-to-day management of Inner Space Center's affairs. Sona has delivered workshops and seminars on a range of different topics that we're going to delve into today, such as meditation, stress management, interpersonal relationships, and communication. Sona learned meditation during her teenage years and was really amazed at how quickly and effectively it enhanced her ability to focus and absorb information. Since then, she has refined her personal practice, from which she delivers wisdom and easy to implement skills to create strong minds and clear intellects. Trained as a professional translator and interpreter, Sona has another accolade to her belt, which is the fact that she speaks 7 languages. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited to talk to her. Hi, Sona. Welcome to Dose of
Hi,
Inspiration
Shika. Hello, hello.
Live. Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. I'm surviving the heat here in Abu Dhabi.
Oh, how hot is it? What's the temperature?
It's about 43 degrees outside. Thankfully, I've got the air conditioning going inside.
So firstly, Sona, that's a lot of accolades to your belt. You've traveled and meditated in several countries, moving frequently. How has that constant change and movement shape your perspective in life in general and your spiritual journey as a meditation teacher?
Well, it wasn't like I chose to move, but it just seems like I was born a traveler. Born to move from place to place to place, every few years. Initially as a child with my father's job, and then somehow the trend just continued. I've traveled a lot to places, obviously, the long list there are not places I've lived in,
Mhm.
but when you travel, I think it helps to understand people more. And, many preconceptions we have about, well, this is how humanity is and this is how it should be.
Yes.
Well, when you see different cultures, you go, well, no, it's different for them.
Yeah.
And they do things completely, opposite to what I might, but it's fine. So it's really broadened my intellect, broadened my vision. And
Mm.
in terms of meditation, it's really helped me to understand that everybody has their own story.
I lived in Abu Dhabi for 7 years. It's a pity we never met when I lived there for so long.
Well, it's a big city, and because meditation wasn't very popular when I first got here, it took a while to set up. It took a while for people to trust that meditation could help them.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's been a lovely journey, but definitely incrementally, gaining the trust of everyone who lives in the city.
excellent. So, Sona, I've now gone through your bio. If you could tell me and the viewers, who is Sona truly?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I sometimes wonder if I ever know myself. Well, I think, Sona is somebody who has a very, very big heart.
Oh,
Sona's got a very golden heart.
mm,
She just wants to be able to fit everyone in.
that's beautiful.
And it's taken quite a few years for me to understand, how to keep my heart open and not to shut it down to anyone. And I think Sona is also somebody who is a brilliant connector. So
Mm,
I'm good at connecting to people and connecting people to each other.
right. Wow.
So yeah, I'd say that's who Sona is really. I sort of stand between the East and the West physically, but
Mhm.
also in here.
Mm,
Coming from an Indian background, but having lived in so many countries, I can kind of pretty much reach anywhere, with my mind and with my understanding.
okay.
And so I can sort of visualize the whole world as my stage. I can get anywhere on the world wherever I want to, and I can connect different parts as and when needed.
Mm, that's amazing. So, where were you born, Sona? You were born in India?
Born in Mumbai, yes, that's where my grandparents lived, my mum's parents. So as is traditional in India, my mum went there for my birth.
How long were you in India before you first were on the road, so to
Oh,
speak?
probably 1 year. I think I had to complete my first year before I was sailing with my dad because he was on a ship at the time.
Oh, wow. So he was a sailor?
He was actually an engineer. He's a marine engineer. So yes.
Lovely. And so you were on the ship with you and your mum? And
Yep, just the three of us, yes.
okay. And so that probably gave you that glimpse of travel, I suppose. That,
Yeah, well, it began there, didn't it? Even before I could settle on land, I kind of had to, yeah, float around on the sea.
yeah. How was that? So you're not seasick, that's for sure.
I don't think so. I have no memory of that time, but obviously it happened.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. And how long were you jetting off or sailing off
I
before you?
think probably a year before we settled in Hong Kong, and that's where we stayed for 3 years.
Okay.
And that's probably where my sister was born. Yep, it is where my sister was born. And then from there, we moved on to Italy and stayed there for 6 or 7 years. And I used to study in the UK for some of those years. And then we moved to South America, then back to India. And then after I got married, to Australia, and then the UAE.
Wow. Yeah. So just off the bat, out of all these places, what's the best place or best memory that you've got?
Probably have a lot of wonderful childhood memories of Italy,
Okay.
and just that, very, very comfortable, homely culture. So that's very, very special to me. But I
Mm.
also have lovely memories of living in Australia,
Mm.
and especially friends, because I was older then. I was in my 20s and 30s. And so some of the friendships that I made then, I've held on to.
The best part of traveling, I find, is the connections you make.
But it's a different perspective, isn't it? It's a broad kind of citizenship.
Yeah, no, definitely. So how do you think this global experience influenced you specifically in terms of meditation? And when did this meditation journey begin, like amongst all this travel?
Well, I started meditating 37 years ago, actually, when I was 16.
Okay.
And I think at the time I was I was asking a lot of questions about life. I wanted to know what this journey on earth was all about and where it began, where it was going to end. And I think just being somebody who belongs everywhere, but doesn't belong to a specific place,
Mm.
helped me to make others belong to me very
Mm.
easily.
What-
So because I haven't grown up in just one place, I really don't know where to say I'm from, which is
Yeah.
probably a good and a bad thing. But for me, I'd say it's more good than bad, because it's helped me realize that this inner self, the being,
Mm.
um, don't really belong to a culture, one nationality,
Mm.
one set of people, and that I can belong to absolutely everyone.
Mm.
And that's okay. That is a way of being.
Yes.
And somehow it just makes me feel so unlimited.
Mm. That's a beautiful way to look at it. Where were you, by the way, when you first discovered this need to learn a bit more about yourself? Which country were you living in at 16?
Yeah, so at 16, I was living in India, northern India.
Okay.
But my dad and I were on a holiday in the UK, and I'd gone to meet my friends in Italy, and he had stayed back in the UK. And then when he came to pick me up from the airport, Heathrow Airport, we were on a bus going back to Birmingham, where we
Mm-hmm.
were staying. And he said to me, Sona, I've just done a meditation course, and some of the things they say are very linked to the sort of questions that you ask.
Mm.
And so he sort of took me through a few of the classes on the coach.
Oh, okay.
And I remember thinking, oh, this is interesting. And
Yeah.
then probably a few months later, back in India, I actually wandered into the center and said, look, probably good to learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I felt that a lot of what I heard answered the questions that I'd had all
Mm.
my life.
Mm. Can you recall one of the questions, the burning questions that you had? And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I remember being a young child, and in those days, the Time magazine was very popular. And of course, there wasn't social media. And so we relied on print media a lot, to find out what was happening in the news. And one Time magazine in particular had pictures of children starving in Somalia.
Mm.
And, children so, what can I say, emaciated,
Mm.
malnourished. And I remember looking at that saying, Mum, why is it that I'm so comfortable
Mm.
and, these children have to suffer?
Mm.
How come? How come the world is made this way? Why is there so much disparity? It seems unfair.
Mm.
And it was at that point that I found out, that from mom and dad's perspective, there was no answer. It just is what it is. But somewhere in my mind, I knew I needed to find out why the world was the way it was.
Mm.
And so when I studied meditation, when I understood so many aspects that connect in with meditation, I got these sorts of answers, and that's what's kept me going.
Mm.
Because then was then. I mean, look at the world now.
Mm.
I don't know how people survive without answers.
Mm.
The state of the world is so, so unpredictable and feels very extreme to me.
Mm.
And I'm not the sort of person who can just go along going, oh, well, whatever. I
Mm.
feel like I want to know for the sake of being able to then assist others too.
True. Yeah. But if you had to answer somebody as an elevator pitch kind of answer, what would you say to that person?
I'd say that there's been a lot of give and take over the last few thousand years. And a lot of the give and take has become quite negative. People have become very self-centered. And, as we've become weaker internally, we've needed to depend so much on the world, and we've taken from each other, we've robbed each other.
Mm.
We've, even spiritually kind of consumed each other's energy.
Mm.
And it's left us all with lots of strings of bondages and attachments, and such a web has been created of what we call karma, just give and take, basically.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of that playing out now, the return of that give and take. A simple thing is climate change, global warming. I mean, how long can you push nature
Mm.
and misuse or abuse nature before you feel the effect of that? And I think it's happening on every single level.
Mm. Is there hope, Sona, for people who want to know, like, is it going to get better?
Yeah, there's only hope.
Mm.
I think along with hope, there's a deep faith that at the core, humanity is good.
Mm.
And so if each one of us goes back to our goodness,
Mm.
we can create a better world.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. Okay, so that was a very tough questions to begin with, but thank you for answering that. Back to your story of your world citizenship. Which part of Italy were you describing when you said it was the best place that you'd lived apart from Australia?
So it's a small port called Ravenna. It's about an hour south of Venice.
Okay.
And it was the old Byzantine capital of Italy before Rome was made the capital. So it's
Oh.
very beautiful. It's got those stained glass church windows and lots of mosaic, and it's incredibly artistic and very, 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 very lovely to live in. Quiet,
Mm.
small,
Mm.
which made it even more special. All the cobblestones through the central part of the city, and a lot of it is untouched even now. So it's very, very pretty.
What makes it today the best city in terms of your memories?
Definitely the people.
Yeah.
Definitely the wonderful, open-hearted people,
Mm.
and the wonderful Italian cuisine. Can't
Of
forget
course.
that.
Of
So
course.
yeah, I grew up on, yummy Italian food and lots of big hearts around me.
Oh, lovely.
Very happy childhood,
Yeah.
felt very safe,
Yeah.
very comfortable.
So from Italy, you went back to India or when?
No, so after 10, we moved to South America,
Okay. Which
to
part?
Chile.
Chile.
Yeah.
What was the language barrier to begin with?
Well, I spoke Italian, so then I just had to sort of
Learn.
learn Spanish, which was quite similar.
Yeah.
Probably spoke something in between for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah.
But don't forget, when we lived in Italy, I also went to boarding school in the UK. So it
Okay.
gave me a very deep connection with that country and the culture there. And it's quite different to Italy,
Mm.
but I was able to get the best of both worlds.
Mm. Okay. So you were in boarding school whilst your family was in Italy? Is that what you said?
That's right. Yeah,
Oh,
I was
wow.
in
How,
boarding school from the
so you
age
were
of
coming.
6.
Okay. So since 6, you've been in boarding school. That's
Yeah,
pretty young to be in a boarding school. How did you find
it
that?
was. It was. I think at the time it was tough. It was
Yeah.
really tough. 6-year-old child, taken away from a very comfortable family setting, away from mom.
Yeah.
Um, I guess at the time it was quite traumatic, but you just go through it, don't you, in life, and get on with what you have to do. I mean, in hindsight, there was so many benefits. But at the
Independent.
same time, I probably wouldn't advise anyone to send such a young child to boarding school. It
Mm-hmm.
was hard for my parents because I was starting to speak more Italian than English.
Mm-hmm.
And they really didn't, I think, want me to end up being an Italian speaker only.
Right. Was that the reason for the decision to send you to boarding school, or?
Well, I think where we were in Ravenna, there were really no international schools, so they had to send me somewhere.
Right.
And it was the choice of sending me to the UK, where the well-established schools, or to another larger city in Italy.
Mm.
And that still would have been boarding. So I think they chose the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. And you lived in the boarding schools until your family relocated to South Chile.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, we would be, I mean, I was back and forth.
Yeah.
We had school holidays. And so I probably spent about 5 months in Italy and 7 months in school.
Right. Yeah.
Wasn't
There's a
too
lot of
bad.
long holidays in Europe, good balance, but still in
Mm.
hindsight, living abroad is did you say you had a sibling?
I have a younger sister, yes.
Did she also do boarding school?
She did, yeah. I think just for a couple of years though, whereas I probably did for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So I'm 3 years older than her. So yes.
Okay. Okay. So tell me now about Chile. Now we're back to Chile at the age of 10.
Actually, again, another change. So as you mentioned in the beginning, it's been a journey of hop, hop, hop. And so again, you kind of restart your life. You have to make friends again, you have to readjust culturally to school, everything really.
Mm.
And just the pain of being torn apart from your friends, that were, and the comfort zone that had developed in life.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. And
Mm.
I think by the time I adjusted, which was 3 years, it was time to move again.
Yeah. And where were you next from
So
Chile?
then we went to India and settled in a town in northern India called Chandigarh.
Okay.
And so then we did a 10-year stint there
Okay.
until I got married and moved to Australia. But again, can you imagine living in the West and then suddenly moving to India when I was 13? Very, very tough. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever really completely adjusted to the Indian culture and social fabric.
Mm. Yeah, assimilation, especially in a Punjabi town, Chandigarh. I mean, I know people spoke English, etc. The
Barely,
language,
barely.
that's what I mean. The local language took precedence, so it's another language for you to grasp.
And I didn't speak Hindi at the time, which was, the national language of India. So I kind of had to get into school and immediately start to learn languages and Indian schooling is quite rigid. It's very high standards.
Yeah,
So
super.
academically, I wasn't up to the mark. So I had to, even though I was a good student, but I had to really up my game. And
Mm.
culturally, I couldn't wear the clothes I was used to wearing. Chandigarh at the time was, not as modern as it is today. And
Mm.
so culturally, there was such a huge shift that went on.
Mm.
And there was a part of me left in the West,
Mm.
and a longing to go back to a life that was kind of felt freer, maybe.
Yeah. So I guess Australia probably felt at home when you did move here.
Yeah, so Australia, again, another adjustment because Australia is different to the UK.
Yeah.
Australia is different to Italy. So it was another adjustment, but an easier adjustment for me.
Mm.
And of
But
course, by then I got used to India, just about.
oh yeah. True.
And being close to, the family and the extended family. So
Yeah.
then, moving away from them
Yeah.
took a little while, but I think I settled into Australia quite well.
Right. Which part of Australia were you living in when you first
Well,
arrived?
we landed in Sydney. My husband and I landed in Sydney. And then after 6 months, we moved to Melbourne, which was, a wonderful, wonderful time.
Mm.
And I started meditating again in Sydney. So that's when I kind of decided that meditation has to be a practice for me.
Yeah.
Not just something that my parents did and I did as a teenager. I decided that this is it. This is the life I want.
Oh, okay. Wow. How old were you when you got married? and moved here?
23. So I was 23 when I got married, and 23 when I moved to Australia, 23 when I started serious meditation.
Oh, wow. Okay. So immediately after marriage, you decided that
Yeah, that's
meditation.
right.
Wow. Okay. How was that? Did it help relationship point of view, or from a being married and suddenly trying to fit spirituality and meditation into, or was it like an easy thing because it just
Yeah,
became part of your life?
it was a very easy transition. I
Okay.
think for me, I kind of got to a place where I realized for myself
Yeah.
that I couldn't live without God or spirituality or
Mm.
something meaningful in my life.
Mhm. Mm. It's beautiful. Yeah. Did you have kids, or do you have kids?
No, I don't have any children out of choice.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So your husband's pretty supportive. Is he also a meditator like you?
Is very much so. Yeah, we started that journey together. I was 23, he was 26, and goodness knows what happened to us and why we turned spiritual, but we did. And here we are 30 years later,
Oh,
still on the same journey.
it makes it so much easier when both you and the partner are on the same page,
Absolutely.
on the same stuff.
And the
Yeah.
strange thing is we're very different. We're quite different personalities. But somehow, the interest in meditation and the values, I guess, that meditation brings to your life worked for both of us. So,
Mm.
yeah.
So speaking of values, if you could just briefly tell our listeners, what are the values that meditation brings to life?
Well, I think for me, the first thing that I would say is like a foundation to my entire life is the word non-violence.
Mm.
And I knew this word from Mahatma Gandhi's teachings, which I had heard on and off in India.
Mm.
And I always liked that word. It's ahimsa in Hindi, non-violence. But I didn't understand what it meant deeply
Mm.
until I embarked on this journey of meditation. Some people call it purity, like
Mm.
a cleanliness inside.
Mhm.
And so for me, this is what is the foundation of my meditative lifestyle. And I realized that not sending out any form of energy that could hurt, potentially could hurt
Mm.
anyone or even myself
Mhm.
is where I want to be eventually. That's my goal.
Mm. Do you-
So for me, that is the greatest value. And then of course from there come so many other beautiful emotions and virtues like love, like compassion, like maybe mercy. And peace is always there anyway. If you say non-violence, well, it's sort of very close to peace.
Yeah. And do you think that you've achieved all that you wanted to achieve in these 30 years, or in terms of these values that you were trying to?
No way. I don't think I've gotten halfway there yet. And the reason I say that is because it feels like the more you go along the path, the longer it is. The more you discover yourself, the
Yeah.
more you uncover yourself, the more you realize there's inner work to do. It's more subtle.
What do you think was the first step when you were trying to set off on this journey of inner transformation and, more energy neutral, if that's the word I could give, or positive energy, because you didn't want to give out anything that could be perceived as negative
Yeah.
energy?
I think my whole journey has been really learning how to reflect inwards
Mhm.
and understanding that everything that's coming out of me, whether it's a thought, a feeling, a word, behavior, is because of me. It's not because of anyone else.
Mm.
And to own that and to really embrace that and say, well, okay, they might have triggered something, but ultimately it's something in me that's being expressed. And where did that come from?
Mm.
What is it that I need to sort out inside? What is it that I need to change?
Mm.
And this has been my entire powerful in the early years, in the first decade. But
Mhm.
as life has moved on, I think this process of reflection has become deeper and deeper. So it's almost like you're diving, deeper and deeper into yourself.
Mm,
really checking where there is any discomfort or disturbance.
mm-hmm. So if I could then ask, what a situation does come in front of us that does challenge some of our upbringing, and what is it that we need to do to pause, to stop reacting to that situation?
Mm. I think for me, the first thing is just understanding that it's me.
Right.
If I'm disturbed, it's because of me. If I'm upset, it's because of me.
Mm,
All discomfort inside is me. And I really need to own that.
mhm,
And the minute I own that, I
mm,
think I've taken charge of 80% of the problem,
mhm,
because it stops the blame game.
mhm.
It stops the finger pointing. It stops being judgmental of others.
Yeah,
And then once you start to look within,
yeah.
it's all a process of healing and trying to find the hurt, the pain, the trauma,
Mm,
whatever it is that's being triggered again and again, and then gently sorting that out.
mm, mm.
Because
Yeah.
as you know, life isn't a straight journey for anyone. It's quite a wiggly path, isn't it? And
Yeah.
on that wiggly path, we all have so many experiences. And as those experiences grow layer by layer by layer, they often get covered. A lot of our emotions, a lot of our layers get covered by more layers and
True.
in a way suppressed.
Yeah.
And so we may not consciously remember what has happened, and
Mm,
yet it is showing, it is actually expressing itself through my behavior and through my outward personality.
mm, mm. So do you think that in any given situation, you have that ability to stay grounded and, perhaps maintain a sense of stability?
Yeah, I'd say I've got a good handle over how to sort of step back, detach, and then respond.
Yeah, okay.
And I probably would say I have a bit of a wobble every month. Like once a month would be, a situation where I think I probably react.
Yeah,
Then have to sort of look back and go, okay, so where did that come from?
yeah.
Um, how did you allow someone to trigger you there?
Mm,
But that's great because it actually gives me an opportunity for deeper insight.
yeah.
So more inner work.
And I guess with each situation, if there is a trigger, then I guess you become closer to learning different ways of dealing with newer triggers.
We say we're dealing with triggers, but actually I'm dealing with me.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, yes, the triggers are there. The triggers are not going to go away. I live in a community with people, I'm not sort of sitting in a cave anywhere, and I don't plan to do that.
I know.
But it's not just people, it's also situations. As we mentioned earlier, life is becoming increasingly unstable and unpredictable. A simple thing like you're traveling from A to B, flights get delayed, you miss a connection.
Mm,
How do you handle your feelings at the time?
mm,
So it's not about, just people and relationships. It's everything.
mm.
How do I handle life? And what is life teaching me
Yeah.
about me?
Mm. Do you want to, Sona, give us an example of where you were triggered, for example, like, and what you learned from that situation?
I think at the core or at the root, just as we have inner goodness,
Yes.
so you might have the goodness of love. It might be your core, maybe peace, maybe mercy, maybe joy.
Hmm.
In the same way, we probably all have a particular weakness
Mhm,
that gets triggered in many different ways.
mhm.
And I think I've identified my own weakness being a feeling of rejection.
Right.
So if I feel rejected in
Yeah.
any way, and
Yeah.
it's also happening in my head, it's not that someone's rejecting me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if I feel that in any way, then there is a reaction.
Right.
There can be a reaction. I mean, I can many times bypass the feeling and go, nah, I'm not giving into this. But if there is a reaction, usually when I try to do all the analysis, the internal analysis, it takes me back there.
Okay.
And if I feel in any way that I'm going back to that place, I just ask myself, why?
Mm.
You're doing so well in life. People love you. You love yourself. God loves you. There's no need to feel rejected. And I've kind of understood that it's going to take whatever time it's going to take to sort it out.
Mm.
But every time I choose not to buy into that emotion and that feeling,
Yeah.
I will put my energy towards something better within me. I'm sort of shifting, I'm shifting my energy from weakness to strength.
Mm. Mm.
And so yeah, it's been quite hard to firstly identify and accept that, but now also to realize that it hasn't fully gone, even though I wish it had.
Mm.
And I think, one thing then, the weakness inside us are like a team. One thing triggers another and another and another. And so whilst my entry point might be here, yours might be there,
Yeah.
but then they all get triggered, everything gets triggered inside, and then you have all these emotions dancing up and down.
Mm.
But I think for each one of us, the entry point, that one specific trigger,
Yeah.
needs to be identified.
Yes. Yeah. Was it easy for you to identify that that trigger word for you is rejection, or
No,
that's something
no.
took some
No,
time?
it happened in an art therapy workshop, actually, run by a friend of mine who was an artist. She lived in Iceland.
Yeah.
And she was running an art therapy workshop in one of our meditation centers in London. And I just happened to be there. And it was a brilliant workshop. I think it was probably, I don't know, 12 to 15 years ago.
Okay.
And I remember she sort of helps you tap into your subconscious mind through artwork.
Yeah.
And of course, that bypasses all the rational reasoning and excuse giving and, how your mind gets in the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, through artwork, she sort of goes through a process which helps to identify what's going on deeper inside. And for me, that was quite a revelation. I was
Really.
like, what? Where did this come from, And
Mm.
invariably, it will take you back into your childhood and
Mm.
some sort of trauma that happened when you were a child that
Mm.
has probably left a mark.
Mm.
And that keeps sort of regurgitating itself. It sort of comes up again and again and again when triggered.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. So walk me through this artwork. What were you drawing, or what did she tell you that you needed to draw? That's
Well, she takes you through a sort of meditation process.
okay.
And while you're in this meditation process, she asks you to just go back to a time where you remember something that wasn't uncomfortable in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
Usually people will go back to their childhood, invariably somewhere within the first 7 years of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can be up to maybe 8, 9, 10.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's usually very early on. And that then is the initial trauma that sort of repeats itself again and again.
Just elaborate a little bit more on how those childhood experiences, and you mentioned age 7, how does that impact your adult life?
Look, I'm not a psychologist.
Mm.
I'm not a psychiatrist. So all that I know is just my own reading, and my own sort of, I guess it's just my own research, my own interest in the area.
Yeah.
But it seems like the first 7 years of your life are the formative years.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever happened then, what I've understood is you don't have much defense mechanism then. The child is like a sponge.
Mm.
And so whatever happens around you, you just kind of absorb it,
Mm.
including your own emotions.
Mm.
And then that sort of gets cemented as part of your, as part of the foundation of your life, like your programming.
Mm-hmm.
And if people believe in a past life, then maybe what happens then is linked to, what happened in your previous birth. And if you don't believe in a past life, then, well, that's the bedrock, that's the foundation of your life and your journey on this earth.
Mm.
And then, of course, as you grow, that can be triggered again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And so that then starts to sort of become stronger, and you re-identify with that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, I'm not a psychologist, so
Oh.
I'm sure people who know and have studied this would be able to give you a lot more in-depth information.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a meditation teacher, you tend to hear a lot about people's lives and their experiences. And I find it fascinating how a lot of people's issues internally, not the issues out there, not what's happening in your life, but what you are perceiving it to be. A lot of that gets set in your childhood.
Think meditation can help in healing those deep-seated issues?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Again, meditation is a right brain process. It's not a logical process. It's a way of going deeper inside yourself and reconnecting, not just with all these layers of acquired behaviors and emotions, but even deeper, going to the very core of the soul and really feeling and experiencing your goodness. And I feel that when you do that, you kind of bypass all these memories and you start to recreate the memory of your goodness. And within that, there is so much feeling of safety, security, peace, love, acceptance of the self. And invariably, the people who come to learn meditation here in Abu Dhabi, and I guess around the world, the people who've been on a difficult journey, and a lot of our self-respect gets battered when we're on a difficult journey. So many people are left quite vulnerable, feeling lost. But when I reconnect to that core, it helps to deal with that vulnerability, and it helps to rebuild my self-respect from an inside-out perspective, which is the real thing, the real me.
Is there like a technique or practice that people can or understand, and also to heal from their past and negative memories and letting go of whatever childhood trauma they may or may not have had?
Yep, I think just understanding that I am this inner self.
Yeah.
I am that inner conscient being. And everything external, the body, my life, my bank account, my cars, my houses, whatever, that's all what belongs to me. But I am essentially the inner self, the inner being. When I understand that, and I also understand that originally I was just good, just pure, clean, pure energy, untouched, unpolluted, then I kind of understand that there's that me, the pure self, and then there's all the layers, the acquired stuff. And so to be able to sort of sink deep, 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 deep inside myself and reconnect with my inner space, that place of complete stillness and love and peace is the way to start to get to know yourself, get to know the real you, and to emerge that, to sort of pull it out. And then once I get confident that there is something good inside me, then from that perspective, I can look at all the layers, and perhaps I could call it rubbish, the stuff that's accumulated, and I can see it in a detached way. I don't get emotional about the fact that I'm a bit angry and I'm a bit greedy or I'm a bit attached. I go, okay, well, that's there and I need to deal with it. But yeah, I can own it in a much more healthy way.
Okay. But you've now discovered that the core word for you is rejection. And you've learned that there is, you as an inner being are full of virtues. That is who you are. Forgiving come as part of that. And if somebody is holding on to some kind of past emotional baggage and they want to release that and they want to forgive, there are tips that you could guide them on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my favorite sayings is God never forgives because God never condemns.
Okay.
And, people ask God for so much forgiveness, right? It's such a common thing. God, forgive me, Lord, forgive me. And I just realized that a pure soul, a pure being, never judges or condemns.
Okay.
Because when there's understanding,
Mm-hmm.
when you can see someone's story or your own,
Mm-hmm.
that understanding gives answers to why the person is the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I really believe that intrinsically we are good.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though many of us have kind of perhaps strayed away from that inner state of purity or goodness,
Mm-hmm.
I feel that every human being wants a life that is peaceful and happy and loving, and whatever they do is to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, what we've been taught and the way to get there might not be a very peaceful way,
Mm-hmm.
but we all want something good.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at any situation and any person now, I try to understand where they're coming from
Mm-hmm.
and why they're saying what they're saying. They might be, incredibly angry or full of ego or violent, or whatever it might be. But I try to put myself in their shoes
Mm-hmm.
so that I don't condemn and I don't judge them, but I
Mm-hmm.
just understand where they're coming from. I do get there, sometimes not immediately, but I don't think there's anyone that I haven't been able to understand and have deep compassion and love for. Yeah, so I think when you talk about forgiveness, forgiveness is only applicable when I've condemned someone and judged them.
Mm-hmm.
It might be myself. I might have judged myself and said, "Oh, you did something so terrible. It was a mistake. You're so guilty," or it's someone else. But there first has to be an element of judgment,
Mm-hmm.
and an element of, this is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point you decide to release them from that, and then the forgiveness comes in. But if
Mm-hmm.
I don't judge in the first place,
There's nothing to
I don't
forgive.
need to forgive.
But so people who potentially have made mistakes, and you said don't judge. So how do people release that so-called mistake if they're not confessing to God or if they're not asking for forgiveness? Where do they go, like in terms of releasing that?
Understanding. You just need to understand why you made the mistake or somebody else made the mistake.
Right.
And when you understand, then for me personally, there comes an acceptance that I'm not a bad person. I don't mean to do bad, but my programming is such that this is what's there. And then once I understand and I accept myself, there's kind of like a calm that settles. There's a peace that comes that it's okay. It's okay. It's happened. And now if you do want to make a shift or a change, you can. You just need to understand what you don't want to do again, and then take steps to, reprogram or delete that program and, upload another app, download another app.
Okay.
So I think that God is a separate thing to myself.
Yeah.
And the relationship with that supreme being is a personal relationship for each one of us.
Yeah.
But when it comes to dealing with myself and other people, it's something that I need to do. I can't really expect God to do all the forgiving and the accepting for me.
We've got to start with being easy on yourself before we can then move to the next step of healing.
Yes, yes.
What advice would you give somebody who's struggling to find this balance between their intellect and the emotion side of it? Because there's one thing, which is the rational brain, which is saying it's okay, mistakes happen, and the emotions such as guilt. So how do they maintain that balance between their intellect and emotions?
Well, I remember many years ago saying to a friend of mine, how do I deal with guilt? When you do something wrong, how do you actually process that emotion? And this friend of mine said, guilt is that sort of alarm bell inside. It's your conscience saying, hey, don't go that way. If you've been that way, you've made that mistake, well, do you really want to go there again? So it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Mm,
It's good if I feel guilty because it's just telling me, it's informing me that I've identified something that's not me.
mm,
But one of my mentors, Daddy Janki, I
mm,
remember her saying many times, you can feel guilty, but just for 5 minutes. And then you have to put a stop to it and
mm,
go, okay, I felt bad. I've regretted what I did. And now it's time to move on.
mm,
And I think sometimes it's important to actually feel remorseful and feel like, oh, well, really, that wasn't right. I can do better. I can be a better person. And because that realization, that point of realization,
mm,
then helps me to change the course of my responses, changes the direction that I
mm.
want to travel in.
That's a good point. Tips that you would like to offer in terms of sustaining this practice that you have now spoken about when we do deal with life's inevitable distractions?
So I think one of the biggest tips that I'd give anybody in today's world and seeing the state of the world is to really take on this habit of reflection. Holding up a mirror in front of yourself and, gently, very gently touching base with yourself every day.
Mhm.
Because I think what's happened is a lot of our life has gone by unprocessed.
Mm,
You're on a treadmill and you're, just getting through day after day after day after day, week after week, month after month. And a lot of who I am today is just a product of my life.
mm,
Imagine someone who's cooking and just chucking things in
mm,
without measuring, without assessing, without tasting to see how it's going.
mm,
And I tend to do a bit of that sometimes, but you do need to touch base with who you are,
mm,
and just to make sure that you're in a happy place.
mm,
So reflecting every day, possibly in the evenings,
mm,
making sure that you're closing your day
mm,
in a way you may not be happy, but you've settled. You've
mhm,
settled what needed to be settled. You're not carrying forward more pain, more disturbance inside.
mm.
So
Yeah.
then what happens is there's less judgment at the end of the day on myself or someone else
Mm,
because I've taken time to understand.
mm,
And so I'm not carrying forward more stuff that I then have to sort of end up going back to forgiveness, to help me out with.
yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. And yeah, but I guess if you don't create a mess, you don't have to clean up the mess.
Mm.
Saying.
Yeah, I think it's a good practice. I mean, reflecting on your day and as you said, doing some mirror work, and that could, you know, be simple things like journaling or talk to yourself in the mirror about things that have gone right and things that have not gone so right in a day. I think you feel a bit lighter because you've kind of acknowledged it, and you can, I mean, you mentioned the word God, and if people who believe in God can give that to God and say, look, this is what's happened and this is the self-analysis that I've done, and now I just want to sleep and not carry this forward, in your words, so that the next day can start afresh without that heavy mind and intellect.
Yes, and I think letting go is the word that I would use.
Yeah.
Really allowing that energy to leave you, so that
Mm,
it's not just in the head where you say, okay, well, it's over,
mm,
but it's from your heart.
mm,
Don't hold negativity in your heart.
mm, mm. You talked about the word mirroring. Some of my friends do it. They go in front of the mirror and they look at themselves and maybe do some affirmations or, tell themselves that they love the person that they're seeing. Is that something that has been part of your practice or something that you suggest?
No, I haven't tried that. It's not a bad practice. I think it's good. I
Mm.
just haven't done that. I spend very little time in front of the mirror.
Yeah, I know it seems so vain, doesn't it? I haven't done it either, but a lot of my friends, they say just go in front of the mirror, look at yourself, and just tell the person that you're seeing that you love them and it's okay, and of everything that has happened, but you're proud of the person that you are looking at.
I think it's a beautiful practice. If if it works for someone, it's lovely. I probably do it, but I do it more internally.
Mhm. Do you journal?
Not regularly,
Okay.
but sometimes I just write down my thoughts and feelings
Hmm.
when I need to.
Okay.
But it's not a regular practice. It is good though. It is good.
Hmm. So when you do have to unburden, what do you do when you do talk to yourself in a quiet, silent way, or?
I just write down my thoughts. It's like dumping, I'm dumping everything from here onto a piece of paper.
Hmm.
Because when I see it in front of me written, it has a different impact than holding it up here.
Hmm.
Somehow when it's up here, it's all just madness. It feels like it's all just a big jumble.
Hmm.
But if I can put it down, then I can actually look at it and go, hang on, what is going on inside?
Hmm.
What are you really feeling?
Yes. Yeah. I truly believe journaling helps. Do it every night if I can, regularly. Just it does help unburden, and then it just gives me a good night's sleep. Because I've put it out there and reflected, and then I've kind of said something to myself in terms of how I could do better. And then that will give me that peace, the inner peace, to then let it go, as you said, which is critical.
Yeah, so I think it's really individual, isn't it? How you get to that place where you can let go.
Yeah.
But as
Yeah.
long as you let go.
Yeah, it's not, sometimes it's very difficult for people to let go, but they are in guilty space for years and years. And that's, again, I think perhaps a meditation center could help them.
Yeah, I agree. A meditation center or even a very good friend, a really good friend who you trust,
Mm.
could probably help, because often when you speak to someone, you use them as a sounding board.
Mm.
Then, firstly, you're offloading your troubles, but you get a different perspective. I mean,
Mm.
that's what a counselor is all about, really.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I mean, I'm not a counselor either, but I end up counseling people, more giving advice and helping them to give themselves advice just through conversations.
Mhm.
And I guess that's just part of being a friend, isn't
Mhm.
it? So I
Mhm.
would always say to people, if something's stuck and you're not able to deal with it yourself, don't let it drag on for years, just find someone you can talk to
Mhm.
and offload.
Yeah. Yeah. So, having lived across so many cultures and speaking these seven languages, do you think like we're all the same, no matter which part of the continent or part of the world that we live in? Are issues all similar ultimately?
I think the key word is similar, but not the same.
Okay. What
Yeah,
would
I'd say the
oh,
underlying sort of the underlying emotions are the same,
yeah,
but different cultures present the problems in different ways.
right. So it's the conditioning of the environment that the people grow up in that
Yeah.
perhaps have different sets of challenges.
Yeah. So, for example, you might talk about, we hold on to labels.
Hmm.
Some parts of the world might hold on to more labels to do with their identity as a citizen of a country. Some people might find that the part of the world they live in really identifies with profession. For
Hmm.
some, it might be family status. For some, it might be their religion. For some, it might be their looks.
Hmm.
So it's different, I mean, essentially, we all have an identity issue because we are identifying outside in,
Hmm.
but it is different. It is similar, but not the same. That's my own experience.
How do you adapt your teachings to resonate with the people from different cultural backgrounds?
Well, it's definitely been important to understand, firstly, the nature of the culture,
Yeah.
and that can take time.
Mm.
And then, of course, the basic fundamental rules or laws of life are the same. The laws of spirituality are the same.
Mm.
but to help people to be comfortable with areas where they are stuck. You know, because usually cultures, areas that are not so great, they push them under the carpet, they sweep them under the carpet. And we don't talk about those areas because they're so ingrained in us, they become part of our blood, really, so to speak. And so to be able to actually, you know, talk about it and bring it out in the open and say, well, you know, do you feel like you identify here and it is something that is perhaps affecting your own personal identity or ego? You have to do it very gently. Where I am accepting of other people, people will be accepting of me. And that's where you can agree to be friends even though you're different.
Yes. Yes.
And I think from my perspective, meditation is a choice. How I live my life is a choice. Whether I believe in a spiritual part of me or a God, a supreme being, it's a choice. Everything is my own choice.
Yes.
So nobody, at least I'm not trying to push a point or prove a point.
Yes.
And so when there's that energy in the exchange with anyone, then there's a respect.
Okay, very nice. You also work, correct me if I'm wrong, in the corporate world, don't you, as well?
Yes, a lot.
Yeah. How are people in the corporate world in terms of their receptiveness to meditation?
Well, again, I think everybody needs more positivity in their minds, peace, a lot more acceptance of what's going on in their hearts, even though they may not understand that initially. But people are looking for solutions to their own emotions and relationships. So whether it's home, whether it's work, it's the same me.
Yes. Okay.
And once people understand that, then they realize that, you know, you're working with a team at work, you're working with a team socially, you're working with a team at home. But it's you. It's the same you that's transporting yourself into different situations. And so people become a lot more aware that they need to work on themselves. So I think meditation is accepted. But, you know, again, different parts of the world have different cultures in terms of how much time you should spend on yourself. And sometimes just encouraging people to give themselves that 10 or 15 minutes with themselves and to be able to say that it's necessary and it's okay. Sometimes to get to that point is not easy.
Yeah, that's true. So is it more challenging in the corporate world, or is it similar, like in terms of?
I'd say it's more challenging. It's more challenging.
Yeah. What do you think are the common challenges, like professionals that you deal with are facing in terms of adopting these practices of meditation and perhaps integrating mindfulness that we're all trying to learn?
One of the big challenges that I see is people don't know how to set boundaries. And so work becomes a bit of a mishmash, you know, someone's throwing this at someone to do, and then you don't know how to do this, so you give it to someone else, and then you get overloaded because you don't know how to say no. Some people don't even have much of a personal life 5 days a week, you know, they're working 12 hours, 14 hours a day. So somehow we've lost the ability to balance our lives and to respect the fact that I do have a right to have a social life. I do have a right to look after my body and exercise it a bit every day. I do have a right to spend time with my children, my loved ones. And that work is not everything. But because money and wealth and stuff, you know, possessions have become so important, we sacrifice the balance for just acquiring more.
That's true. We're constantly on this hamster wheel, proving our worth, that work has just taken over basically our lives.
That's right. And you've really nailed it, because it's all about my worth. You know, meditation helps me to reconnect with the goodness within, which makes me feel worthy to myself. But when that has been reduced, then the only way that I can identify with myself and prove my worth is often by how much I earn, how much I have, what car I drive, what clothes I wear. And even if it's not something that you show to the world, it just might be something that you use to prove to yourself that you're okay and you're worthy. But it's still an outside-in process, and it's not really a deeply spiritual, deeply loving, deeply self-respecting place to be in.
I interviewed Charlie, and he mentioned that success is not the big car, the big house, the money in the bank account. Yes, certain parts of that are important, but it is actually how you feel inside. And are you really happy? And can you say that you are peaceful inside and there's nothing, no waste thoughts that are happening, no turmoil in your head? That is where success comes in. If you can sleep, put that pillow on your head and go to sleep without too much burden on your head, then you've truly become successful.
Yeah, agree, totally. But to be able to get there, there's a lot of unpacking to do.
Yes.
And getting to a place where I can love myself despite my mistakes, despite my past, despite my story, and despite the mistakes I'm going to make in the future. You know how there's a saying, forgive them for they know not what they do. I think it comes from Christianity. Well, forgive myself, for I don't know what I'm going to be tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to do, but let me not judge. Let me just really, really be at peace, be in love with who I am.
That's true. A lot of my friends in the corporate world, some of them are dealing with toxic bosses, some of them are dealing with very strong personalities of colleagues. And, you alluded to the fact that, you have to not judge. You've alluded to the fact to understand the other person. But when you're in a situation, it's very difficult. So what's the advice that you're going to give somebody who is in that category?
It's interesting because I was just talking to someone yesterday in that similar situation. And I said, when you get to work, just spend 5 minutes grounding yourself, centering yourself with meditation, and just create a bubble of protection around you.
And
just imagine. So yeah, exactly, like this yeah. And I said, if anyone says anything and if anything comes to you, just remember you're in your bubble. And if you stay there, you don't necessarily have to be a sponge and just soak up everything that's happening around you. Because this is the greatest boundary, it's the boundary of not allowing myself to be influenced and affected by other people's stuff and their ups and downs and their nature, their personality. But it starts with, I guess, visualizing that I am in this little comfort bubble, comfort zone, protection bubble.
It's beautiful, Sona. Is there a story that you'd like to share where you were in a vulnerable situation or dealt with a strong personality, and how you handled that in terms of the protection bubble?
Well, I guess I handled and I am handling myself and, the stuff that goes around me, that happens on a day-to-day basis all the time. And when I remember that I'm in my comfort bubble, that I'm in this protected zone, then I don't allow myself to be affected by people's emotional dramas. It really stops that reactive self from, reacting without thinking. But when I forget it, when my guard is down and I haven't really created that space, then you just leave yourself vulnerable to the outside world. So it's a day-to-day thing for me, really. There's not one story. There are probably hundreds of stories. But we are surrounded by emotional roller coasters within and without. This is what the world is at the moment. It's so unpredictable, so so unbalanced and unstable.
So on the flip side to that, what's your most rewarding aspect, that if you had to reflect on your journey, what would be the most rewarding aspect?
I think relationships, having very loving, very accepting relationships. I think getting to a point now where there's very few people who I feel can really trigger me.
Mm-hmm.
And just realizing that, my heart has expanded a lot from being, a person who was quite judgmental, quite critical, quite self-righteous. I just think my heart has become so big now
Yeah.
that no matter how people are, it's okay. And traveling so much around the world, I've realized that even to do something good, there's many ways of doing it. There's many definitions, there's many choices people have to express themselves in a way that's good. And I've just, even things that I thought were not correct or not right, I've had to let them go. And it's been such a freeing process, really.
It's beautiful.
And I have to add, I'm not there, but I'm getting there.
No, it's good. I mean, you at the start when I asked you who Sona was or Sona is, you said she is a golden heart. And it's so beautiful because for those who are listening who don't know what the word Sona means in Hindi, it actually does mean golden, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
you Sona with the golden heart, him and being the golden heart. But it's good. It's good if nothing can bother you. Sona, that's a very powerful place to be where you're not triggered by much.
Well, I won't say I'm not triggered by much, but it's better, so much better. And the thing with gold is you can mold it, right? You can shape it. It's soft, it's very pliable. I always remember that. I remember that you can mold gold. And the more flexible and easy I am, the more accepting I am, the more I'm coming closer to my truth.
What about your husband and your relationship with him? You said that, I mean, although you both follow the spiritual path together, you're both very different. How do people who are in relationships where their personality doesn't, is not similar to their own personality, how do they deal with that relationship? What's the tip that you like to give?
Well, I think it's live and let live.
Yep.
Ultimately, I think that's what life is about. And even though we've been on a spiritual journey together, he's a different person. He's got a different programming. His upbringing was quite different to mine. So we're very good friends. He lives in a different city to me. At the moment, he's living in the Middle East, but I travel to him, he travels to me. We have a very, very good friendship. But none of us impose on the other. And I don't think the expectation that one has to give up their life for the other has been there of late.
It's lovely.
And that makes it easier for each one to grow in their own way and to be who they want to be.
And for those that are not there yet in their relationship, should we hang in there, or what's the tip that you like to give to those that?
Definitely hang in there. Definitely hang in there and just try to accept that someone's different to you.
Yeah.
Communication's a big one.
Yeah.
I think just, being able to say, look, this is how I am, and I know that you might be different. But often if we don't communicate, then there's a lot of misunderstandings.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's what breaks a lot of relationships. It's not the fact that you're different, it's just the fact that you can't communicate the differences and then come to a place of acceptance.
Thank you. Okay, so Inner Space Center, that's what you're running. What's the future aspiration for that center?
Well, Inner Space Center has been going now for about 13 years. Yeah. So it's 14th year running. And we've been able to touch the hearts of many in Abu Dhabi and in this country, the UAE. And we'll continue to do so. I guess as, again, life is changing dramatically for everyone, there is a need within this population, but I wish we could reach out more to perhaps people who haven't heard of us and who are now starting to experience instability in their lives. You know, it was different 15 years ago and it's different now.
Mm.
So I guess for me, it's just keep doing what you're doing and trust that those who are taking benefit will pass on the information to others. You know, word of mouth is the best way of marketing, isn't it?
That's true. It's
But at
social.
the same time, I'm also, you know, trying to get meditation started up in another country. So there's always new things on the horizon.
Mm. So you've got your hands full already with the new country.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, very nice. So for those that are trying to look for you through this medium, how are they going to find you? Should they Google Inner Space Center and
Yes, they can Google Inner Space Center in Abu Dhabi, and there will be contact information there, and they can WhatsApp me, they can email me. Anyone's welcome to connect and happy to have another friend from somewhere around the world.
perfect, sounds good. And if you could leave behind, say, one key message or lesson for newcomers or for anybody else that's listening, what would it be?
Just be really easy with yourself, easy on yourself. Life wasn't meant to be difficult, so just take it easy.
Sounds good. Thank you, Sona. Generally, what I do is when we finish our podcast, we go through a rapid fire round.
Okay, here we go.
Are you ready for some firing questions? They're just really
All
simple,
right.
but it's fun
Sure.
round to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
So morning person or now night owl?
Definitely a morning person.
Really? Okay. Any favorite meditation spot, given that you're a meditation teacher?
Any comfortable couch.
Okay. Sounds good. A book that's perhaps changed your life?
Probably Jonathan Livingston Seagull,
Mhm.
you know, which I read in my teenage years, which was, you know, one of those books that really touched the heart many years ago.
What's it about? Just in a nutshell.
About a seagull who looks at other birds and wants to be free and finally realizes that he is.
Lovely. Tea or a coffee person?
Tea, in fact, chai.
Mhm. Um, and I think you've also already answered this question. The favorite country that you've ever lived in?
Yeah, I'd have to choose between Italy and Australia, and it'd be a hard choice.
Okay. Mountains or beaches?
Definitely mountains, because I'm a colder weather person.
Um, if I could ask you one word that describes you best.
Golden.
Golden heart. Any go-to mantra or affirmation that you
It
go
is
by?
what it is.
Okay. Okay. Any guilty pleasure?
Oh, dark chocolate.
At least you said dark chocolate.
It's
Um,
chocolate, but it's dark.
it's good for you. That's what they say anyway. Out of all the
Hope
7
so.
languages that you speak, favorite language that you love talking in?
Well, I'd have to say English. Yeah,
Mm.
express myself best in English.
Yeah. One thing you can't live without.
My morning cup of chai.
Um, if you could have dinner with any spiritual person or spiritual leader, who would it be?
Oh, probably one of my mentors, Daddy Janki.
Hmm.
Yeah, she was so wise and so amazing.
Lovely. And what's the favorite way that you relax after a long day?
I put on some soft music, any classical soft music, and just sit with a cup of tea and just empty, empty, empty. Come back to me.
Mm. Anything that's on your bucket list right now?
Well, having traveled quite a bit, I guess if there's one more place left that I haven't traveled to, two actually, one was Scandinavia and one is Russia.
Oh, okay.
I haven't
Lovely.
been to these two places and I've heard a lot about them.
Yeah.
So yeah, but apart from that, I can't say that there's anything left that I feel like I really want to achieve or do.
Mm. And Sona, any piece of advice that you'd like to give your younger self?
Yeah, probably just to be more easier on myself.
Mm. Mm. Lovely. And if we could go with any last words or any last sayings or last quotes or anything that you'd like to end with.
Well, the quote that I mentioned earlier, God never forgives because God never condemns, it sort of really helps me to elevate my game.
Mm.
But often when people are going through tough times, the other one that I often go to is this too shall pass.
Mm. Mm. I love the fact that, if you can tell yourself that you've actually been victorious many, many times, because we've gone through many challenges and we've come out of it. And I think that's my go-to, the fact that I've done harder things and I've survived those and I will survive whatever is here at the moment. Just
So empowering, isn't it?
gives you that little comfort.
Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you. Thanks for spending this hour plus with me. I'm really grateful for your time, and I'll put some links in for people who want to contact you. And yeah, thank you again for your time and for all the wisdom that you've given Dose of Inspirational Light listeners. Thank you, Sona.
Thank you, Shikha. It's been wonderful being with you. Wonderful.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Next time.